Is there something outside that window? What is up, guys? So today we are back with another deep dive, diving deeper into the Nightmare Cup, and let's see, by my math, today should be Saturday, which means my regional tournament is actually today. Hopefully I can have that video up relatively soon. I don't think it's going to be up on Saturday. My tournament is about an hour away, and then I will come home, and then on Sunday I turn around and have my Nightmare Cup the very next day. Probably more than likely it will happen that I will have the regional tournament up on Monday and then Nightmare Cup soon after. I'm going to try my hardest, but I'm not going to make any promises on what exact day they'll come out. That's a rough guess at this point, but that's the plan as of now. So today we're actually going to be looking into Poliwrath, and Poliwrath actually coming off of our Nightmare Cup. Actually, a lot of people seem to think that Poliwrath could be an interesting pick, considering that last month, or like in the Nightmare Cup, he was technically a pretty favored pick because of his quick access to power-up punch using Mudshot, even though Mudshot is legacy. So I kind of was on the same boat as you guys, trying to figure out if he's actually going to be good this month, just like he was in the Nightmare Cup. So let's actually check this out. So Poliwrath is actually a water and fighting type Pokemon, maxing out at level 40 with 15s across the board at 2586. Perfect for the Ultra League, but of course we're talking about the Great League today, so with a 0 on attack, 14 defense, 15 stamina at level 22, you can max out at 1498, keeping yourself underneath that 1500 CP limit, while also trying to maximize your stat product with that specific IV spread. Now, according to my spreadsheet and all the numbers that I have ran, Poliwrath should rank 21st in bulk and 20th in stat product, so pretty nice there. And of course that is based on his base stats here, which is a 182 on attack, 184 defense, and 207 in stamina. That is a great PvP spread here. Next, we're going to move into the moves here, and holy cow, does Poliwrath have some moves. Bubble, Mudshot, Rock Smash, Hydro Pump, Submission, Ice Punch, Dynamic Punch, Power Up Punch. Holy cow, 8 different moves, 3 in the fast move area, 5 in the charge move area, and as you can see, I only wrote 5 up there. So I did exclude 3 different moves from the list. Let's actually go over those really fast and why I excluded them. Rock Smash, 3 energy per turn, 3 damage per turn. It does get a stat bonus based on the fighting typing for 3.6 damage per turn. The reason that it's excluded is that it doesn't really offer anything better than Bubble in the energy department, nor Mudshot in the energy department. Plus, with it being a fighting type move, it's not really as key in this cup as it would have been in another cup, so it's excluded. Then we have Submission. For 50 energy, you get 60 damage at a 1.2 damage per energy ratio. After stab, it does get bumped up to 72 for a 1.44 damage per energy ratio. It is legacy. It is a fighting type move. Same exact thing as Rock Smash. It's just not as important this go around. Then we do have Dynamic Punch, 50 energy for 90 damage at a 1.8 damage per energy ratio. After stab, it does get bumped to a 108 for a 2.16 damage per energy ratio. So actually, it's a pretty decent move. It's actually our most efficient move, but it's fighting, and it just doesn't matter nearly as much as the moves that we have here. So let's actually talk about these. Bubble for 3.67 energy per turn for 2.67 damage per turn. After you factor in stab, it does bump up to 3.2. Then we have Mudshot for a 4.5 energy per turn gain for a 1.5 damage per turn. No stab, of course. And when you look at those two moves, there's some debate. And because there's some debate, I actually did run both moves for you. So we do have a moveset pertaining to Bubble and a separate moveset pertaining to Mudshot. Let's get into our charge moves so I can tell you those. Hydro Pump here for 75 energy, we get 130 damage at a 1.73 damage per energy ratio. After stab, it is bumped up to 156, which makes it a 2.08 damage per energy ratio. Pretty nice. Ice Punch, no stab for this, of course. We have 40 energy for 55 damage at a 1.38 damage per energy ratio. And we have Power Up Punch. So 35 energy for 40 damage at a 1.14. After stab, we do go up to 48 damage for a 1.37. And of course, the big benefit, even though it's such abysmal damage, is that we do get that attack boost each time that we use it. So, these two movesets are kind of interesting. The first moveset that I went with was the Mudshot moveset. So we have Mudshot, Hydro Pump, and Power Up Punch. So on PV Pokey, it does actually like to give us Ice Punch instead of Hydro Pump, but in my testing, I actually got 3 out of the 4 shield situations with a better win percentage than with Ice Punch. Actually choosing Hydro Pump gives you a better percentage there, so I decided to go with that. And it does make some sense considering that Ice will actually hit Grass for super effective, but we take a ton of losses in the Grass already, so I guess the simulation doesn't give it as good of a run for its money. If you already were to farm off of another matchup, yes, you could use that Ice Punch, but more securely, it makes more sense to go with Hydro Pump here so that you can just quickly get to that Power Up Punch, charge yourself up, and then actually have Hydro Pump to either do neutral damage to a lot of things or to just run completely over the fire types. Our second moveset is actually Bubble. Ice Punch did make the cut here, and Power Up Punch. So the reason that we actually run Ice Punch in this moveset is to just actually give us some extra neutral damage in case we need it. So Bubble is actually going to be there to actually just flat out start off the match with fire types in a bag. We're just going to be able to easily take them to the cleaners. And then we have Ice Punch to actually give us some neutral damage amongst some of the other typings, but it does actually help us in that grass type like I mentioned earlier. And then Power Up Punch, of course, just to let us get to that even quicker. Now, for what it's worth, I also did run Mudshot, Ice Punch, and Power Up Punch just to see like how quickly the speed does actually help us. And unfortunately, it really actually prefers Power Up Punch in a lot of those scenarios just to quickly charge, and then it'll try to use Ice Punch if it's going to kill, but generally it doesn't kill, so it tries to just keep using Power Up Punch, and once we hit all of our boosts, it doesn't really do a whole lot for us. So there is something to be said if you want just like a pure shield busting, like crazy fast Poliwrath, then Mudshot, Ice Punch, and Power Up Punch would actually be pretty interesting. But other than that, the two movesets that we're going to be looking at are Mudshot, Hydro Pump, Power Up Punch, and then Bubble, Ice Punch, and Power Up Punch as well. So let's actually get into those with our shields here. So our first column here is actually the Mudshot, and our second column is actually our Bubble. So comparing these two, we'll actually whip out some marker colors here. In our first shield scenario here, we do have the 0 versus 0, which is kind of like the mock-up closing type situation. We actually end up winning 50% when utilizing the Mudshot and 34.8% utilizing the Bubble. So Mudshot actually takes it there. I'm not left-handed, don't judge. In our next shield scenario, we have 2 versus 0, which is where I have 2 shields, my opponent doesn't have any shields. We actually end up winning 82.6% on both. Fairly nice there. So basically, we're not actually looking at that 82.6 and trying to figure out everything that we beat. I'm actually trying to look at the opposite to try to figure out what just flat out ends up beating us whenever I have 2 shields and they don't have any. And to no one's surprise here, grass types run over us like crazy. Also, there are a couple of confusion users in the cup like Slowbro, Slowpoke, Celebi, which we just went over yesterday, and then there was another one that I can't remember off the top of my head. But basically, grass type and confusion types are the worst for us, considering our typing is weak to the grass and then weak to the psychic. So that makes a lot of sense. So even on those. Our next shield situation is actually a 0 versus 2, or when I don't have any shields, my opponent actually has 2 shields. With our Mudshot, we actually end up winning 17.4, so not too bad. In the Bubble moveset, though, it's 19.6. Woo. So that actually ends up taking it there. Now, actually for that moveset, I'm actually worried about the ones that we do actually end up winning. So in both of these scenarios, we actually just start to take out the ones that we're super effective to. So with the Mudshot situation, we're super effective to a lot of the electric types, which do start to show up here. Then in the Bubble moveset, we're going to be super effective to a lot of the fire types. So that's what ends up translating there. And it does make sense that this number is higher considering there's more fire types in the cup than there are electric types. In our last shield scenario here, we do have a 2 versus 2 or the mock-up like opening type situation. We actually end up winning 60.9 with our mud shot and 62 with our bubble. So, the only moveset that I didn't write down was the 1 versus 1. Actually, the mud shot ends up winning 57.6% in the 1 versus 1, and bubble ends up only winning 56.5. So why did I run that in the first place? What does that even matter? Well, what I ended up doing is I took all 5 situations and I actually averaged every situation together to figure out on average which moveset is going to end up winning more matches. And it's really close. So close that it's only a literal 2.6% difference, and that translates to like 2 or 3 losses at the most. So honestly, I would say whichever one you really want to use, whichever build that you can have, go for it. If you have the Legacy Mudshot, then build this thing to be a really fast attack building beast that just likes to slam things with Hydro Pump. That's probably like the most heavy hitting Pokemon that I can imagine. But if you don't have the Legacy and you're really partial to your Poliwrath, then running Bubble with Ice Punch and Power Up Punch actually could be pretty good for you. You just have to tailor that Poliwrath to be more of a fire targeter and then like try to use it in the matches that you can to farm and then hopefully take out some of the grass types. Because when we get into our matchups, you will see the grass types are a pretty big hard loss. So for the rest of this video, I do want to let you know that all of the simulations from here on out are actually ran using the Mud Shot. It's going to be Mud Shot, Hydro Pump, Power Up Punch, and the only reason is because it did end up having that extra 2%, I did end up going with that. So in all of the deep dives, I end up taking our subject Pokemon, Poliwrath, and I end up putting them up against the top 10 bulkiest Pokemon in the cup just to kind of see how they do. Now on PvPoke, you do actually get the option to build a custom group of Pokemon that you want to test against. I have already pre-built my group: Azumarill, Shuckle, Jumpluff, Dugong, Lapras, Lantern, Mantine, Suicune, and Fortress and Tentacruel there to fill out those moves. Now you will notice I do have several Suicune, and that's to give us a kind of a general idea based on the 2 current moves that it does have in its pool versus the hidden power move that it actually has. And I took the top 3 hidden powers from PvPoke and just kind of threw them in there to kind of figure out the best way to, I guess, assess Suicune. Really, I think it's actually 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it's 4 hidden powers. So anyways, once we fill all that out, we choose Mud Shot, Hydro Pump, Power Up Punch, 1 shield versus 1 shield to try to give the most evenness to both Pokemon. We hit battle, and holy cow, this thing is killing it. Alright, so Shuckle is a win. Dugong is a win. Suicune with Snarl is a win, which makes a lot of sense considering we do carry that fighting typing. We're going to resist a little damage there. Lapras is a win. Suicune with Hidden Power Water is a win. That makes a little sense because we're also going to be able to resist some damage there. Hidden Power Bug. Okay, nice. Lantern, Suicune with Hidden Power Ground. Fortress, Extrasensory Suicune. Hidden Power Grass Suicune actually doesn't even end up beating us. And then we have Tentacruel. Tentacruel is a tie, which is weird, but okay, I can stand behind that. So what does that actually tell us? Well, Shuckle, Dugong, Lapras, Fortress, Suicune, and Lantern all are our wins there. And then Tentacruel, because it's a tie, I do count it as a loss for myself, considering that I ended up losing my Pokemon as well. Tentacruel, Azumarill, Mantine, and Jumpluff are all losses for us there. So actually, that's pretty good. I mean, that's probably the best record I think we've seen so far. 6 wins and 4 losses. That's pretty freaking good. Next, let's actually get into some countering situations here. So the countering section is actually what should we be trying to shoot for with our Poliwrath versus what should we bring to the table to try to combat the Poliwrath. Well, as far as what we should be using it for, 3 out of the 5 typings I think are pretty solid here. So bug typing, let's actually go over that. So in PvPoke, we built our Poliwrath up against the entire Rainbow Cup, 1 shield versus 1 shield. We hit battle there. We can see that 57.6% pretty freaking good. I mean, that's actually pretty good. So looking at the bug typing, you can see Pineco, no big deal. Ariados, no big deal. Let's actually skip down to some of the closer matchups. So Scyther's gonna be kind of close. Beedrill and Yanma is actually gonna be a tie. And then we do lose to Parasect, Venomoth, and Butterfree. So why do we end up losing to those? So Parasect actually should have access to some grass type moves, or the bug type moves you can see there. It just ends up putting a hurting on us. It does end up resisting quite a bit of our damage there. We don't really have a whole lot to work with. And then the Venomoth actually does have access to Confusion, which, like I said, the Confusion users are a big deal. I'm pretty sure Venomoth was the one I was forgetting. Then we do have the Butterfree here. Let's actually take a look. It actually has Confusion as well. So, wow, even getting off 2 power-up punches in a row, it still can't deal. So that's pretty crazy. So you can see those 3 losses there, but otherwise the bug type is pretty solid. Now let's actually go over the fire matchups here. You can see Houndoom is no big deal, Arcanine, Entei. Let's get to some closer matchups here. Oh, well, that's cool. So Magmar, Ho-Oh, and Typhlosion are actually the 3 closest for us, with Charizard actually being a tie. So the Charizard matchup makes a little bit of sense. If you think that it's going to be able to resist the ground type damage that we're trying to throw, plus it's able to resist the power-up punch, and then it's going to take us a while to actually get to that Hydro Pump. So you can kind of see here, it actually does end up winning quite well, even with Wing Attack as the legacy move. If we switch it over to Air Slash, you can see it still does end up winning, just flat out. And then if we give it Ember, let's just see. Ember, actually we take it if it has Ember. If it's running Fire Spin, which I suspect a lot of people may try to do, you can kind of see that we do actually win that Fire Spin. The Wing Attack is really awkward. I don't know why it prioritizes Wing Attack, maybe for energy reasons, but even if it has Air Slash, you can kind of see we do end up winning that. So you can kind of see that it just flat out ends up beating us if it runs Air Slash. So that one's going to be kind of a toss-up. I don't know if people are preferring Air Slash at the moment, Fire Spin at the moment. It could go either way for you depending on which move they are using. Charizard could be up in the air. Pun intended. Now let's actually look at some water matchups here, and I have written down greater than 50%. The reason for that is it does look like we roughly win more than 50% of these matchups. We lose only a few down here at the bottom. Let's actually take a look at the ones that we lose. Slowking, Slowbro, Mantine, Azumarill, Slowpoke, Tentacruel, Chinchou, Lantern, Quagsire, Starmie, and then we do tie up against ourselves. Interesting. So Slowking, Slowbro, and Slowpoke all should have access to Psychic type moves, which, like we said, is a big no-no for us. Mantine has access to Flying type moves. Azumarill is just the tank of all tanks, and as you can see, it does end up putting a pretty big hurting on us when it actually gets to that play rough. Tentacruel, utilizing extreme poison type damage. Oh, it actually is utilizing Acid Spray there, which is pretty nice. Depending on which moves, I wonder if it like has to have Acid Spray. It can tie if it doesn't have Sludge Wave. What about Hydro Pump? I doubt Hydro Pump's gonna help it. Yeah, still a tie there. So Sludge Wave does seem to be the preferred move to win this matchup. I don't know how often people are going to be going for a complete poison build. That's a really, really like neutral damage oriented Tentacruel. I feel like some people are probably going to lean more towards Hydro Pump or Blizzard, just kind of depending on what they're going with. But in any case, you can kind of see that the Tentacruel matchup is kind of close. Then we have the Lantern, the Quagsire, and the Starmie I'm sure is utilizing some kind of, Hidden Power Psychic. That one's going to be a toss-up. I mean, if they happen to have Hidden Power Psychic, yeah, you're probably going to lose that. So the water matchups are pretty okay. And then you can kind of see all of these that you end up winning. They're either going to be weak to fighting, weak to just any kind of crazy damage, or you're just going to be like completely doing enough neutral damage that you can kind of overwhelm them with your pure amount of speed based off of Mudshot there. Now let's actually get into what we should bring to the battle to actually combat our Poliwrath here. So Electric, I do have written down less than 50%. That's because we only win 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. We're not going to count Zapdos as a win. Magneton, Magnemite, Ampharos, Flaffy, all are going to have problems with us. Zapdos, not nearly as much, considering that it is going to make that Mud Shot neutral, and then we just kind of have to rely on Power Up Punch, which it's going to be resisted. And then, yeah, there's a lot of resistances going on there. Raikou is going to be just able to crazily output some Shadow Ball neutral damage, I'm sure. No, actually, it's only utilizing Wild Charge or Thunderbolt. So if we actually give it Shadow Ball, it still ends up beating us. I do think that people are going to go with that Shadow Ball for neutral damage. Jolteon, Electabuzz, I actually want to see this Jolteon really fast. So Thunder and Discharge, if we give it Last Resort, does that change it? No. Next, we're actually going to be looking at Electabuzz, Lantern, Raichu, Chinchou, and Electrode. Electrode is actually our worst possible match. That's crazy. So Spark, yep, Discharge, Thunderbolt. You can kind of see there, even if we take Thunderbolt off, yeah, it's still going to end up winning. So you can kind of see that the electric typing isn't necessarily like 50-50. We do win a couple of them, but we're basically just winning because we can still hit them for that, like, little bit of damage with Mud Shot and still hopefully overwhelm them. Magneton and Magnemite, being the steel typing, they are going to take extra damage from the Power Up Punch and the Mud Shot, so those make a lot of sense. And Frozen Flaffy, they don't really have a whole lot to combat us with, really. So as you can see there, Charge Beam holding them back quite a bit, I'm pretty sure, on both Pokemon. Yeah, Charge Beam is just kind of... Last but not least, let's actually take a look at the grass typing, and this one is pretty bad. So we have Execute, Parasect, Tangela, Jumpluff. As you can see, all of these are just straight up losses. Sunflora is the worst possible matchup for us. Celebi's in there, Meganium, Ivysaur, Venusaur. As you can see, they're all really, really hard matchups to go up against. So... now, there is something to be said about the Ice Punch here. If you are able to farm off of another matchup, it is extremely kamikaze to actually try to use Ice Punch in this scenario, but you could whip out the Ice Punch and just flat out punch them right in the face for some super effective damage. But it's really risky, and I don't know personally for me if it would be worth it to go for that. But it's really up to the moveset that you're using to really consider the grass type a straight up loss or a possible loss with a possible win depending on the situation. So that is actually it for the Poliwrath today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. I'm really digging the Poliwrath. Like, I really think that even though in the Nightmare Cup he has some interesting applications, I think in this cup he's got a really, really hard counter in the grass typing, which, you know, of course you can also have the really, really hard typing in the Confusion users and even Xatu. But in either way, I do feel like in this cup he actually is a little bit more viable than he was in the Nightmare Cup, if you could believe it. So I do actually like Poliwrath. I think Poliwrath is a safe option. Depending on which moveset you go with is kind of dependent on the rest of your team, but he could be a pretty interesting pick. Remember that he does really hardcore lose to the grass types, and he has a big problem with a lot of the electric types, but other than that, he's got some pretty solid matches amongst the other typings. So that is actually all for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. Remember that if you like to like videos, you can do that, but if you don't, you can be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below, and until our next video, I will catch you then.